Well, hi everyone, welcome. I declare this meeting of the Port Phillip Council open, and I welcome the members of the public who are here tonight, particularly the Tayuna Grove contingent and Peter, the Scourge of the Marina. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted, and there's a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question, to make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda. So this will be done prior to the Council considering any item. What else do I need to tell you? If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please approach the officers and report and complete the blue form. So just out there, and I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to 3 minutes and to avoid repeating any points that have already been made by the speakers. Please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. Please also note, in accordance with the council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless you ask and gain permission of the Mayor. I'm pretty free and easy with that permission. In the unlikely event of an emergency evacuation, please follow the instructions of the Chief Warden. So, let's get underway. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Councillor Baxter.
Yes, Councillor Crawford and Councillor Pearl are apologies.
Can I read? May I please read a statement about Councillor Crawford's position? I wish to advise that Councillor Louise Crawford is running as a senatorial candidate in the upcoming federal election to be held on May the 18th, 2019. Consequently, Councillor Crawford will not be attending any council meetings or council briefings held during the period from 1 May to 18 May 2019 inclusive. During this period, Councillor Crawford will not use any council resources for the purposes associated with her candidacy. So, Councillor Baxter has moved those two apologies. Do we have any seconders? Councillor Voss. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's clearly carried. 2. Minutes of the previous meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 17th of April have been circulated. Are there any questions in relation to these minutes? You put your hand up like that, Councillor Bond. I thought you were just about to ask something very probing and intelligent. Of course. May I have a motion to confirm these minutes, please? Councillor Baxter and Councillor Voss. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? That's clearly carried. Carried unanimously. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? There are none, so I'll continue to agenda item 4, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have one petition tonight. Item 4.1, petition requesting watering service at Smiths and Page Reserves. Councillors, we have received one request from a member of the public to speak on this item. I now call on Gary Willis. Hi. Could I ask you to please come down and sit on what I colloquially call the seat of truth down there, and press the middle button and say your name and suburb.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Willis.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Gary Willis, and from Montague area in South Melbourne. And firstly, I've got some more petitions here that have since been signed, since we're just to hand in.
May I ask you to hand them over to an officer, and that's great.
Yes, thank you. And I've also got a little sort of brochure folder. It's maybe 5 pages it's largely pictorial, just to illustrate the issues that we're dealing with.
That'd be
Maybe
great. Could I
hand
ask
those
you
around.
to hand them to
It's
Kirsty and
possibly enough for
can we,
one for two.
pass them round?
There's another one.
Oh, they can share. They're big.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Pete and I can share.
They should be self-explanatory. It's largely a visual. It's a visual thing. So should I address?
If you
the subject?
wish to speak to your petition,
Yeah.
and can I ask you how many have signed the petition thus far? That you...
Oh, I have no idea. There's maybe 12, 15 sheets of them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But they're just gathered on walking through the park. So the story is from my side, I walk my dog in that park, parks, plural, those reserves, on a daily basis. And to be honest, I've been sick to death of the mono conversation about the dreadful state of the park down there. And I thought, well, look, maybe I can do something about it. So on the basis of that, I just printed up a petition, and people have signed it, and most willingly people have signed it. And people have asked for reprints of it, and this is what we've got now, and continue to have an interest in signing it. So it's quite a major issue. From what I can see, the water's been turned off. I don't know how long ago, but the consequences of that, it's a dog park, so much of the grasses in that area have all been sort of torn to pieces. So they've been shredded into dust, basically, as you'll see from those photographs. And with this drought, okay, this is a sort of... But the problem has been there for several years. I don't know how long it's been since the water has been disconnected from that park, but it's possibly maybe in excess of 10 years at least. It's particularly beginning to evidence itself in the state of the trees, which are... older trees are dying in the centre. Particularly the European elms in there are all dead in the middle, and they are creating a problem with the wind blowing, dead trees falling on people. So that's actually really quite a hazard for anybody in the park when winds come. Then many of the certain sorts of trees. There's certain sorts of trees, I don't know, maybe they've access to water table down below. Some of them might be water resistant, drought resistant. Some of them are actually dying. Some of them are actually dead, simply dead. There's been new trees planted in those areas. Many of those have died already. So the consequences of this lack of water are quite diabolical, particularly in that strip. And I've taken the trouble to sort of do a bit of a round on some of the other parks, as you'll see in the illustrations there. They're all very well attended in terms of water, resources. Some of them have even got gardeners, but not the case down on those reserves down the bottom there. And the issue that is really pressing, not so much for me, but rather for the neighbourhood, is the influx of people coming into the Montague area, which is currently in a state of being levelled. I mean, Carlin's car place, there's all these old buildings are coming down now, with the idea that South Bank will continue its sort of progress to Boundary Street, and at that point the population demands on those parks is going to be overwhelming. And the issue is something should be done for those trees before it gets to a point where you might have to pull them out, just simply get rid of them to start again. So it's a kind of prompt to do something ASAP to salvage those trees. And of course, in the long run, something will need to be done about the park, but it's not my job to tell people, there's somebody, no doubt there's great experts here. So that's the case that we're putting.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Willis. The photos are incredibly compelling, so just ask us, have we got anything to say at this stage, Ms. Blair?
Through you, Mr Mayor. What I will say is the whole city has been struggling in relation to rain. I think for the January quarter this year, we had only about 42 millimetres of rainfall. You would normally get about 140. So I think this is only probably 10 times since the 1800s that we've had this limited amount of water. So it is a challenge. We are currently developing an implementation plan for the water-sensitive city, and as part of that, we're re-looking at the irrigation needs across the city. And I guess watering has the benefit of a greening, which creates a cooler environment, and when you water, I guess you weigh off some of the sustainability outcomes. Greening cools, but it also impacts the amount of water you use, so we're trying to balance that as well. But certainly agree that across the city we have a number of parks that are not in ideal condition, which is really being contributed to by the lack of rainfall.
Yes, thanks very much, Ms Blair. Well, thanks very much, Mr Willis. We'll take your petition and we'll move a resolution in relation to that petition, and something will happen, I assume.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
The only other possibility is that you concrete the whole thing over at some point, and because the traffic demands on that are going to be exponential from here on in. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Baxter? And Councillor Copsey moved and seconded. Councillor Baxter, do you wish to speak? Councillor Copsey?
Just to thank the petitioner for presenting tonight and for giving us some insight, and to note that this evening Council will just be receiving the petition and there will be a response developed and presented at a future Council meeting.
Thanks very much. I might just say one thing that, excuse me, Councillor Voss, you go first.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you, Gary, for coming in and presenting this petition. It's certainly something I hear a lot in the community, and it's really weighing up, our green parks versus using potable water, and unfortunately we're also in a drought at the moment, so it's very difficult. We have disconnected a lot of our watering systems around, and subsequently then to put them back on, we've found many of them are not in working order, so we are faced with a lot of dead parks and dying trees, and this park in particular is a very popular lineal park alongside, or both sides of the 109 tram lines, and parts of it are actually irrigated. So parts of it are green, but a lot of it, in particular down in the Montague area, is very dead, and quite worrying the amount of branches that are just dropping. So I'm really keen that Council develops a plan to orderly increase the greening of all of our parks, because everyone is wanting their parks green, and how are we going to go about doing that? So we actually need a proper plan, and because it's really important to the health and well-being of our city. So the future is not to continually use potable water to green our parks. It's actually to use recycled, recaptured water that's come from other places. So hopefully we can get that side of the story. So thank you very much, Gary, and everyone that signed that petition. Look forward to seeing what the response will be.
Thanks. You said what I was going to say, but with more articulation. Councillor Simic?
Thank you. I'd like to, agree with what you're talking about, Councillor Voss, and also raise awareness at this opportunity of issues around climate change. It's across Victoria that we are facing a drought, and when you go outside of inner metro Melbourne, what you see is even more dire, with no grass in most places, completely churned ground. So it's upon all of us to work together to address the worst effects of climate change, because things are actually only going to get worse. It's so unprecedented, the situation that we're facing this year already, but really the future is bleak unless we take steps to urgently address the worst effects of climate change.
Thanks, Councillor Simic. Councillor Baxter, do you wish to close? I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thanks very much, Gary. Okay, so there's no more petitions and joint letters. Sealing schedule. There are none. Public question time. Councillors, we have Peter here to ask 2 questions.
Peter Holland, St Kilda. I've got 2 questions, one on Marlborough Street and one on the St Kilda Marina. So first, Council has a policy to develop the council-owned land at Marlborough Street beside the Balaclava station for community housing, with Council retaining a redeveloped car park. In March 2018, Council unanimously approved this policy, which is in furtherance of its affordable housing policy and the Council plan. The Liberal Party has just announced a plan for a 500-space car park there. This is clearly inconsistent with Council's policy for the land that it owns. It puts cars ahead of people. Has the Liberal Party discussed its proposal with Council? And if so, has Council indicated that it could change its long-held policy?
Can I answer that one first? I think that's a political question, so I'll answer it from a political point of view. And as Mayor, I was told about it after the decision was made, or contemporaneously with the decision being made. It's $15 million offer for the city. My initial view was that Marlborough Street was problematic for a number of reasons, but other sites in the vicinity of Balaclava Station could be quite exciting. For instance, if there was a proposal across the other side of the road. So I've sort of made a decision not to make any substantive comment about this offer of an incredible amount of money. I, like you, do harbour some issues about Marlborough Street, but if a series of events occur and the $15 million is offered, I would be seeking to get this council to talk to the new Liberal government and keep the offer but change the nature of the offer, sort of in accordance with what you're implying. So it's early days yet, and as a councillor said to me, just when other tiers of government come to you in an election
Point of
and offer
order,
you money.
please, Mayor. I don't think we've got a specific position on this.
Sure.
Mayor.
We haven't got a specific position. This is just my personal reaction back to anyone who asks. And so that's where we are. It's just uncertain, and it all depends on a number of it's contingent on a number of situations. I hope that's satisfactory. Is any other councillor wish to comment? Okay. What's your second question?
My second question concerns the St Kilda Marina. At the last council meeting, Mr Yenya Kavatsky said that the community panel on the St Kilda Marina had been presented with a consultant's proposal for the commercial elements of the St Kilda Marina redevelopment. He was wrong in saying this was a council plan, and it was not helpful to use the analogy of Chadstone by the sea. Nevertheless, he played an important role in identifying a matter that the panel had found controversial. It was clear from the discussion that councillors had not been briefed on the consultant's proposal. I therefore ask, 1, have councillors now been briefed on that proposal? And 2, will council put on its website all the information that was presented to the community panel? I believe that it's important to have the maximum transparency in this leasing process, and that consultants' reports should be available to councillors and the wider community.
Thanks very much, Mr Holland. Ms McNeil?
Through you, Mayor. All of the key documents that were presented to the panel were also provided to councillors, and so yes, they have seen everything that the panel saw, apart from a number of working documents and presentations that were provided to respond to particular questions. But all of the key documents councillors also saw. All of that work that has been done with the panel has accumulated in a report that shows all of the items that were discussed with the panel and their views back to council on each of those items, and that report was made public in the community engagement report that was published last week, 2 weeks ago, and is on the website. That report is underpinning the development of a site brief, which will be proposed to council, and also contains very similar information. So consultants did produce a range of information. There was a lot of working documents, but the key information and where officers and the panel landed on all of the key items is in the report that is now public.
Thanks very much, Ms McNeil. Sure.
The actual consultant's report isn't available.
Through you, Mayor, there is no consultant's report as such that is being referred to here. There's no consultant's report proposing a commercial development. That was not developed. All of the technical reports that informed the thinking and the development of the information that is in the public report are on the website already. We've made public every single piece of information that we've developed about the site, and anything that's not publicly available now will be made public when we can, as part of, if it's not made public now, it's part of the commercial in confidence, and we'll make it public as soon as we can.
Thanks, Mr Holland. Thanks very much, Ms McNeil. Councillor question time. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Okay, let's go to presentation of reports. The first item, councillors, we haven't received any requests for any speakers prior to any of the reports. So the first item is the CEO's report, and councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Mayor. As usual, I have a bit of a suite of questions.
Sure.
The first one relates to a comment made in the CEO report regarding the pressure on revenue associated with, it says, our Fines Victoria experience. I'm just wondering, I have asked about this before, but just wondering if you could elaborate on what the intention behind those comments are, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Fines Victoria is the new infringement agency, and as part of the new infringement agency, a new IT system was created. Since the inception of that system, they've had a lot of technical problems, and these issues have been caused by a lack of system functionality. These issues have meant that outstanding infringements and court fines have not been enforced as expected. So from a City of Port Phillip perspective, we've taken a prudent approach, and we have made some changes to the budgeting to reflect that. So an additional $500,000 has been provided for in our bad debt provisions to reflect the continuing uncertainty.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about Fisherman's Bend parking. On page 14, it talks about the reduction that there's been, and Council agreed to reduce the fees there to $1 per hour. I'm just wondering, in the last 2 months since that reduction, what has been the uptake in parking in that area? Has there been any improvement?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, there has been an improvement. Council endorsed the 1 hour parking rate at its meeting on the 20th of February, and it was implemented shortly thereafter. We needed to change the information provided on the tariffs and also provide some information to the community. And what we've found is over the February-March period that the number of transactions has increased by 24%, and the length of stay has also increased by 40%. The next parking occupancy surveys are scheduled for completion next week, with the data which will be provided to council officers soon after, and that will enable us to make any necessary adjustment to the controls in Fisherman's Bend and Port Melbourne areas to encourage a parking occupancy of 75 to 80%. That delegation to make those changes between March and November this year has been provided by council to the CEO.
Thank you. Another question about North Port Oval. So recently the borough had their first game there to much acclaim, and just want to congratulate the officers on the fantastic work that was done there to get that ready for that game. I also wanted to ask about, has everything been completed now? I understood for that game the seats weren't in around the oval, but just wanted to know what else needed to be done and when.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the installation of the new spectator seating will be completed by the end of this financial year, and some additional works commenced this week to erect protective netting that's funded by the club and the AFL Victoria behind the goals.
Can I just rudely interrupt and give an unforeshadowed question? It looked to me like the pickets around the oval were recycled plastic rather than wood. Is that your recollection, or is that a detail too much?
I'd have to take that question on notice, Mr Mayor.
Sorry about that.
Just two more questions. Arts access. I read in the CEO report that alternative accommodation is going to be provided due to DDA compliance. I'm just wondering what's happened there. Why do they have to move out? This has been a long-standing occupation of that building, just next door to here, and if you can understand what's going on, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there are no imminent relocation plans. As Councillor Voss mentioned, officers have been working with Arts Access over a number of years around the suitability of the current property because it is not DDA compliant. I'm advised that officers have explored a range of solutions, but there still remain a range of challenges with the current building. So officers are currently working with Arts Access to try and establish or find a suitable property within the municipality, and further information on this will be provided to councillors as soon as possible.
And one last question. I'm going to ask about the waste strategy. We've got there talking about some challenges, and some of the challenges that we're talking about, we're actually looking for opportunities to partner with other councils in particular. Just wanting to understand, what are we doing there? What partner opportunities have we actually looked at?
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's a range of opportunities that we're looking at. I'll provide some examples of them. So the first one is we've recently applied for a State Collaborative Councils grant in partnership with Glen Ira Council, and that is for funding to do a feasibility study for shared collection services for waste, recycling and food waste in apartments and businesses. So we're currently awaiting the outcome to see if we were successful with that grant. We've also been doing some collaborative policy development, which is the development of a consistent policy framework and reporting systems to encourage recycled content procurement by local government, including looking at processes around reporting and monitoring, and that's in partnership with Maribyrnong, Melbourne and Knox councils with the Metropolitan Waste Group as well. The other ones that we're working collaboratively with are around some of our big waste contracts, and they're in collaboration with the Metropolitan Waste Group as well. So the first one looks at landfill, and that is partnership with all the Metro councils. The other one that we're looking at is around regional contracts for our recycling. So this is the curbside recycling, and that is with Melbourne, Brimbank, Wyndham, Nillumbik, and again it's led by the Metro Waste Group. And the other one is also looking at the possibility of a regional procurement around a future advanced waste processing facility.
Thanks very much, Councillor Voss, and thanks for those answers. Do we have a resolution? Moved Councillor Copsey, seconded Councillor Voss. Do you wish to speak? No, thank you.
May as well round off. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you very much. As usual, this monthly CEO report, I think, provides extremely valid and valuable insight into what's going on in the organisation, and as per usual, the 25 pages, 26 pages or whatever is dense, full of things that have happened in the last month in particular. So just wanted to thank the organisation for putting forward such a quality report.
Thanks very much. Look, I might just say a few words myself. I like to highlight those transformative issues that we're working on, and starting from the top with Fisherman's Bend. As noted in the report, we're doing a lot of work on with the Victorian government on the infrastructure contributions, and that's a very important aspect of our finance going forward, and the importance of building infrastructure in Fisherman's Bend. And we're planning for the engagement on a precincts program on the 13th of May, and streetscape works have already commenced on Douglas Street. So we're beginning to roll out stuff in Fisherman's Bend, which is great. On the Don't Waste It waste management strategy, we have our challenges there, but by the same token, we've reviewed our street and beach cleaning, which was a really extensive look at how we clean our streets. This is a core function of this and every other council, and so I think it was a really great piece of work to look at the way we clean our beaches and streets, and see how we can improve it. We have a less waste program to rescue surplus food from businesses and look at opportunities about using that food, be it in whatever form we can use it, and that's commenced. In the Sustainable Environment Strategy, there's lots of really exciting things. One thing that really needs to be highlighted is that we commence the installation of new electric vehicle charging stations for the St Kilda Town Hall to charge fleet vehicles. It's an absolute insight into the future. A lot else has been happening, but that was the thing that really took my mind and my attention. The other thing that was really important, because of the work of councillors and our officers, particularly our officers at both Fisherman's Bend and Elwood, we won a national award for the water sensitive city. So as we know, Elwood is very flood vulnerable. Fisherman's Bend will continue to be flood vulnerable, and we have to do this work, and we are doing it, and have been recognised by a research institute as Australia's leading water-sensitive city. So that's incredibly exciting. Notwithstanding my excitement with it, there's been no media on it whatsoever because people don't like a good news story. But I will always talk about it because it's something that I'm really interested in. And if I can just highlight in our Move, Connect, Live integrated transport strategy, so we were top of the pops. 15 Port Phillip schools participated in the Ride to School Day in March, and it's been Council's highest number of so far, and I believe it was the highest number in the state, which is a great achievement in a sort of a small project that's important in moulding the culture about way we get around our city. So lots of really good things happened, and I just have to reiterate what Councillor Voss said about North Port Oval. It looked an absolute picture. Everyone was happy. It was just a great day. So, are there any other speakers? Do you wish to close? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks very much. That's carried unanimously. Now, that's the presentation of the CEO's report. 9.1, Community Grants Assessment Panel Terms of Reference. Councillors, are there any questions? Are there any resolutions? Moved Councillor Voss, the officer's rec. Seconded Councillor Simic. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Voss? I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 11.1, Submission, Parliamentary Inquiry into Recycling and Waste Management. I notice that we have an alt rec here. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Copsey, do you wish to move a resolution? The alt rec?
Yes, the alternate recommendation, please.
Do you mind if I make you read that out?
Not at all. So it's additions as marked in red. I'll start from 3.2. 3.2 authorises the Chief Executive Officer to make minor editorial updates to the adopted submission. 3.3 incorporates the following amendments into Council's submission. 3.3.1 on page 1, in the responsibility of the Victorian Government to establish and maintain a coherent, efficient and environmentally responsible approach to solid waste management across the state section, to include the following words. The Victorian Government has a role to advocate for Australian Government leadership and funding to transform the waste and resource recovery industry in Australia and facilitate the transition to a circular economy. 3.3.2 on page 4. As a long-term solution to the recycling and waste management system crisis, consideration of advanced waste treatment must comply with waste hierarchy principles, particularly the sorting and resource recovery of mixed municipal solid waste prior to the consideration of energy recovery.
Sorry, do we have a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Baxter. Councillor Copsey.
So the parliamentary inquiry into the recycling and waste management has been established. It's very timely, as we've seen recently with the sector-wide crisis or statewide crisis in terms of dealing with our state's recycling. This inquiry is an opportunity for interested parties across the state to make submissions into the future of Victoria's recycling industry. I thank the officers for being proactive in developing an excellent submission to the inquiry. Port Phillip is not alone in having had very severe consequences as a result of the inability of recyclable curbside recycling to be processed for a period of weeks earlier this year. And The inquiry is a good chance to take stock of the issues that were created across the state, to consider where we are now in Victoria in terms of dealing with our waste and recycling and where we could be going. These amendments are to underline some really important principles for our city in making sure that the action that we take in this sector, looks up the chain of consumption and production of recyclables in the first instance. So looking to design out unnecessary plastic production and to adhere to the principles of a circular economy where we're recapturing and reusing energy rather than creating wasteful use of products. And also in relation to advanced waste treatment, which is a broad range of technologies, establishing some first principles that mean that valuable resources are not considered for incineration or energy recovery, that there is recovery of the valuable parts of our municipal waste stream as a priority to ensure that recycling is incentivised and that we don't see some technologies which have the potential, if implemented improperly, to create disincentives and to actually compete with the recycling industry in our state rather than to encourage recycling and recapture of resources. So I hope that councillors will accept these additions tonight, slight amendments which are in line with the Don't Waste It strategy which we have endorsed, and I thank officers for their assistance in developing some wording to underline these important elements of our submission, and wish them all the best for the inquiry.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Baxter?
I'll keep my comment brief, but I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of this parliamentary inquiry. I think it's actually going to be fascinating, and I'm really hoping that we'll actually get some good action out of it.
I might just raise one little issue. I've tried to avoid calling it a crisis in waste management system crisis. I'm not going to move an amendment, but I just wanted to make the point. I think it's highly problematic, and I think it could be much better. I just don't know whether I'd use the word crisis personally, but I'm happy to pass this as it is. That was my only observation. Anyone else? I won't ask you then to close, Councillor Copsey. Sure.
Apologies, I just had a couple of other points that I was hoping to make as well. So, yes, I've broadly spoken about it, but Council has been wrestling through the development of our Don't Waste It strategy, and I wanted to acknowledge all of the hard work that's been done by volunteer groups in the city of Port Phillip, who are also working really hard at source reduction and advocacy to lessen the waste stream at the point of production as well. Beach Patrol, who do so much work in actually cleaning up what ends up on our beaches, the Eco Centre, which has been producing some brilliant insight into the pitfalls of some of the technology that's been adopted overseas. They've been really instrumental, and I do hope that any community groups with an interest in this topic consider making a submission over the next week. Submissions are open until the 10th of May, so anyone who is watching along at home, if this is an issue that's been of interest to you, and residents and community members as well, making individual submissions, I know that when the crisis, I call it a crisis because I think the urgency that's surrounded that has created a real opportunity for us to have an in-depth discussion about it, which is useful. And I know that there was a huge amount of community interest in whether or not our recycling system was working at the time. This is the opportunity to give that feedback to the government so that we can have a solution, a focus on the solutions that could come out as we go forward. So the 10th of May is the closing date, and I hope that many people in the community will also participate.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Copsey. Thanks for your work. I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 14.1, status of council decisions for the first 3 months of the year from 1 January 2019 to 31 March 2019. Councillors, we don't have any contributors from the gallery today. Do we have any questions? Councillor Simic.
I have a question regarding item that was a motion on the 20th of the 2nd, 2019 regarding the temporary removal of seats outside the 7-Eleven on Fitzroy Street at Jackson Street corner. I know that this report would conclude actions, and I'm just concerned with that one in particular because the motion states the word temporary. We've asked questions about this previously, and I was given an indication from officers that seats would be returned. I just wanted to find out what the next steps in that space are, and when the seats will be returned to the area.
Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Ms.
Officers
Bennett.
have been working with the community on a collaborative art piece. We've spoken with 4 artists over the last period of time. We're looking to source, we're getting close to sourcing someone to work collaboratively with the community to tell the story of all community members in terms of doing some artwork and painting that on the seat. And then once that work is complete, we would then look to reinstall the seat.
And also Mr. CEO's got an additional...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've been working particularly with Voices of the South Side. We were keen to use the street to do some artwork to provide an inclusion theme, which is part of the shared vision for Fitzroy Street. Voice of the South Side have indicated late this afternoon that they would be worried about... They've been trying to source artists to do a studio and paint individual panels on the street. They indicated they were a little bit worried about having an artist work in that location and believe...
what safety?
For safety concerns. This is from Voices of the South Side. So we're now looking at options. We've got a meeting tomorrow where we'll use Voices of the South Side to research the stories, and we will probably commission an artist through the placemaking budget to do that and then reinstall the seat rather than have an on-street studio, which was the idea that came through from the community. So it's not that we haven't been trying to progress this issue. It's really been about trying to do that in a very creative way, in a way which told a story of inclusion, which is part of the vision we want for the street.
Councillor Simic?
Well, just on a follow-up, so thank you for that work. I think it's important. I think it's good. We want to be inclusive. So in the meantime, there's people that are currently sitting on the floor there, which I believe is the opposite of an inclusive community. So I'll just go back to my question of whether officers can set out a timeline of when seats will be returned, and if it's going to take a while to get the street art project underway, whether there's any inclination from the officers to put the seats back earlier so that we can wait for the street art to happen around it at a later point. I'm just concerned that people are sitting on the street.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have tried temporary seating there so that there is seating on the street, and even with the temporary seating there, I understand people are still sitting on the footpath. I'll have to take on notice and update councillors in terms of a reinstallation time. As I said, we've got a meeting tomorrow, and I'm happy to take that part of the question on notice and give Councillor Simic and other councillors a time after that meeting tomorrow. Thank you for your question.
If there are any further questions, we'll move to... Councillor Voss, moving. Seconding, Councillor Simic.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to speak to this. Again, a terrific report. It's great to see such amazing transparency. So since the 1st of January, we actually didn't meet back here until February, but since the beginning of February to the end of March, Council's made 52 decisions, and basically there's 7 of those decisions that are still remain open or outstanding. So this report gives a very clear outline of what the status is on every single decision we've made and what we're doing about the ones that are still remaining outstanding. So thank you very much for the officers for this transparency. I know we've been doing this for maybe 6 months or so now, and I really appreciate having this so accessible to see where things are up to. So thanks very much.
Thanks. Councillor Simic? Councillor Baxter?
I just want to echo Councillor Voss's appreciation. I love this. This is one of my favourite sort of documents that we actually put out there.
Easy to read.
And since we started doing this, I found it's not only easier for the community to understand where our decisions are, it's easier for us to understand where our decisions are.
I agree.
And it's really, really good. I'm very, very pleased that we do this. Not as many councils do it as they should.
Great. Move to the vote. All of those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. There's so much harmony and accord in a room, it's almost nauseating. 14.2, Outcomes of Audit and Risk Committee meeting 26 February 2019. Councillors, there are no questions from the community. Do you have any questions? Okay. Do we have any resolutions? Moved and seconded by the stalwart team of Voss and Baxter. There's speakers against? We might move straight to the vote if that's okay, or do you wish to say something, Councillor Voss?
Just once again, this is probably one of the most important committees that we have on council, and Councillor Gross, you share the representation of the councillors at that committee, and just want to thank the organisation for all the work that comes through that committee and making sure that this organisation is ticking as it should be, and just to state that we have a very big planning meeting next week with the Audit and Risk in terms of what we are actually planning to look at in the organisation in the next year. So that's incredibly important. I just felt that was worth mentioning.
Good on you. Move to the vote. All those in favour? Another unanimous decision. So that's the reports, presentation of reports. 15 notices of motion. Councillors, we have no notices of motion tonight. Reports by councillor delegates. Councillors, do we have any reports from councillor delegates? This is an opportunity for you to give a report, verbal report. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 2 things to report on very quickly. One, in my capacity as President of the Association of Bayside Municipalities, recently convened a meeting of the ABM Executive to discuss a number of different issues. I want to report that the ABM, of which the City of Port Phillip is a member, has a very healthy budget situation at the moment, and so we approved a number of items around that, and that we are looking at greater resourcing and better use of our executive officer in terms of the relationships that we are building between local government and state government departments. So all very positive on that front, and things are going very well. The second thing I wanted to talk about in my capacity as council representative on the Friends of Suwai committee is that the Friends of Suwai tomorrow night are hosting their annual trivia night to raise funds for all the good work they do, whether that be the scholarships that they help fund in East Timor, or the reforestation program, or that they assist with, the library and community centre, in Covalima or the solar panel village lighting scheme. I mean, the list, it's quite a long list actually, of all the things they do. So it's a really, really good cause, and that trivia night is on tomorrow night. I will be there. A couple other councillors will be there, and the CEO as well, and it promises to be a great night. So I urge anyone who's not busy tomorrow night to go and give money to the Friends of Suai and try to beat us at trivia. You won't, but you'll try.
So, if only the community could hear the boastful hubris we hear from Councillor Baxter about his particular interest and facility with trivia. Are there any others? Councillor Voss.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things from me that I wanted to report. This morning I attended the Domain Community Reference Group, which is all about, I guess, Anzac Station and the building of the rail station there. And essentially we got an update of where things are at, moving the tram tracks, and also the development of essentially the station boxes today. So, and Council actually did a presentation on the precinct planning, or master planning that we're currently undertaking. So that was good and received very well. Also, I have attended recently the Station Pier Community Reference Group.
Sorry, who was attending that? Was that residents or
the Domain?
Yeah.
It's a combination of Rail Projects Victoria, CYP. A lot of residents in both councils, so it's a quite a large group. And the other group, a community reference group I attended was and I'm a member of, was the Station Pier one, which is run and chaired by Vic Ports, and primarily the topic of that was a presentation from the EPA on air and noise monitoring. So that was also very interesting.
And noise.
Yes. Well, that was the experts' area of expertise.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, thanks for those reports, Councillors Baxter and Voss. Urgent business. Councillors, do you have any urgent business? None. Confidential matters. Councillors, we have no confidential items tonight. There being no further business, I declare the meeting well and truly prematurely early closed.